Why is Smiling Friends ending so soon? Is the question that's been on the internet's mind for the past 12 hours. With its creators, Michael Cusack and Zach Hedel, announcing, they're done. No 4th and 5th season like previously announced, no epic, gut-wrenching finale, no TV movie, just 2 more episodes in April and that'll be that. Smiling Friends will have ended its run with a grand total of 27 episodes. Damn. Now this came as a shock to most people. Like I said, a 4th and 5th season had been announced. So it's weird to come out a couple months later and say, JK, actually, it's done. Michael and Zach cited feelings of burnout from working on the show, as well as an overall feeling that the series had run its course. It's done what it set out to do. They've said all they had to say. And so it's better to quit while they're ahead and not risk the show decline in quality with any potential future seasons. This isn't to say they'll never return. It seems as if Adult Swim will always have the door open to them. I mean, why wouldn't they? But for the foreseeable future, that's the end of Smiling Friends. Oh yeah, I got plushies out in makeshift for the cartoon I'm working on. We only got 15 days to sell 200 and get them made. Check them out. Link below. Now this is not uncommon for most shows out there, the creators wanting to take a step back after the first couple seasons, but usually they simply hand things off to a new showrunner who can take over and hopefully recapture whatever magic might be missing without the people who know the cartoon best. This has happened with a million shows. SpongeBob, Family Guy, Simpsons, Star Trek, Better Call Saul. It's not an unheard practice at all. However, Zach and Michael are known for being very hands-on with their projects, ensuring they're completely happy and confident with the final product. And so it goes without saying that taking the approach of bringing in some new guy to pick up where they left off is out of the question. Not that I imagine they could replicate the success those first 3 seasons had. You know, people like Smiling Friends because of what its creators add to it. Anybody else would simply be imitating what they assume the right direction to go is. But Smiling Friends is such a bizarre and unique show that I don't think anybody could come close to replicating its success. I tell ya, I'm waiting for the first Smiling Friends clone to drop. It'll be done by Fox or Comedy Central or whoever the fuck, but it's coming. Even still, it's hard to think the show is already ending. I'd most compare the hype around Smiling Friends to what we saw from South Park when it first premiered. There's a lot of parallels between the 2 series. And so, this is like if South Park ended after Sheffield. I mean, sure, it had a string of great episodes and would most definitely be going out on top, but it's hard for folks not to imagine that they were only scratching the surface of what could be done. It's not the best comparison since South Park is a show with a million characters and a defined world, whereas Smiling Friends is incredibly character-driven and relatively smaller in its cast. So I think naturally a series like South Park has the potential to go on for hundreds of episodes. And Smiling Friends just kinda came out of the gate running. Most would agree that for a lot of massive cartoons, their first season is rarely the best. There's growing pains you gotta get through, and the way TV was at the time, each season having like 20 episodes, afforded shows time to naturally build and hopefully hit their stride. In comparison, Smiling Friends came out hitting the ground running. They speedran that shit. Released, got a string of quality episodes, and then quit before they jumped the shark. I have insane respect for Michael and Zach for doing this. For most, it's probably incredibly tempting to not only keep the show going, but just completely take your hands off it and move on to the next thing, just collecting the residuals. Letting it continue to run in the background as people get at the ready to make their widest Smiling Friends sucking our videos, where they lament about how the show hasn't been good in years and should have ended after the 3rd season. We're living in the opposite reality where the show ended while it was good, and people are still mad. With the way the animation industry is now, on fire, it's hard to imagine actually getting a show picked up, have it do so well that you become one of the few things to go beyond 2 or 3 seasons, and then just stop. Naturally, as it is with any popular show ending, people are upset that their favorite thing is over. And they didn't even get to say goodbye. We never got the finale where Pim and Charlie realize they're in love with each other and grow old in Kansas with their adopted children. But as I'm gonna get into, I think this comes from people getting something out of Smiling Friends that Michael and Zach never really intended, at least not to the degree it wound up happening. Like I mentioned before, this is like South Park ending at Sheffield. But at the same time, this is like Rick and Morty ending just halfway into season 3. What is widely considered to be the start of their downfall. Obviously, at the time, that still would have caused a massive uproar from fans who can't see why it's over so soon. But look at where we are today. I think that show's reputation would have been a lot stronger if that had been the case. I mean, again, that show was already getting worse by episode 27. I think that's what they're trying to avoid here, and whether or not you think it would have, if you imagine a season 4 that completely satisfies all your wants and needs, I think the conversation still starts and ends at they didn't want to. Again, we have so many people talking about how they feel as if they could have gotten away with at least 1 or 2 more seasons, but the reality is, if they're already talking about being burnt out, then it probably wouldn't have been the same, even if just in minor ways. I feel like it would have been a self-fulfilling prophecy where they're so afraid of not living up to the hype that it stresses and burns them out, and because of that, the episodes won't feel the same. To the people who think that they could have just gotten away with another season or 2, I mean, the creators themselves are the ones saying that's not the case, so what could you possibly expect? And that's not even taking into account any of the stress that comes with, you know, creating 10, 11-minute episodes of a cartoon over the span of a year and a half. They evidently put their all into these and don't half-ass any element, and so being mad that they're ending it here just feels like a lack of respect for the time they did put into it. They don't really owe you anything. They don't even have to have a reason for wanting to end it, because it's hard work and a lot of mental energy spent writing, boarding, animating, and directing 1 episode, never mind 10. And that's on top of meeting network demands, the back and forth that comes with that, and on top of the growing fan base and expectations that come with that. It makes sense to say, I think I'm proud of what I did and I'm comfortable leaving it here. Also, none of what I'm saying, by the way, has anything to do with being sad about it ending. Like, be as sad as you want, I get it. I've been sad when shows end. This is more so directed at the people who look at this and say, the show is still good, why don't they just make more? Because it just seems ignorant of all the time and energy that goes into making a show, never mind making a good one. I've also seen a lot talk about this being a shitty thing to do to the artists, to make them believe they'll have work for another 2 seasons only to pull the rug out from under them, especially at such a low point in the animation industry. But not only do I believe this isn't the responsibility of Zach or Michael, despite how unforeseen the circumstances appeared to be, but at that point you're just asking them to continue making the show for reasons outside of making a good show. If their hearts aren't in it, then it's going to reflect the final product. Not that I think a season 4 or 5 is guaranteed to be bad or anything, honestly I don't think Zach or Michael would let it be bad. But they'd probably come out of it utterly drained and even more burnt out. What's to say those seasons wouldn't be really good? What happens then? Well, you might as well cancel it after 6 or 7 seasons then, it's still good, why let it die? And then we'll see the entire cycle repeat until eventually it does start to lose its steam. I understand people feeling like this is an issue manufactured out of a desire to not be the next Rick and Morty, to not have the toxic fandom who get memed on constantly, the fandom who thinks they're better than others for liking a cartoon, the fandom who could be out in public cosplaying as the characters, shouting impressions and ending up in a multi-million viewed cringe compilation, in turn giving the show a bad reputation. Not that their fans are that bad, but it's definitely a conversation I've seen pop up more and more with the show in its 3rd season. Who knows, maybe Zach and Michael did pay attention to that claim. Maybe it did contribute to them calling it quits. See, it might come either way. And while Smiling Friends fandom never did get the chance to reach the heights of something like Rick and Morty, for better or for worse, I think one element that's near impossible not to notice is that around the time of the 2nd season, the fanbase exploded, with a ton of people who got something out of the show that was never intended to be there. At least not to the degree that it ended up happening. People got attached to these crazy characters. As people. Suddenly there was shipping and stans, and folks who'd be upset if a certain character didn't get as much screen time in the past few episodes. Don't Zach and Michael know? That's their comfort character. And all this stuff that is just superfluous to the actual series. Not to say that people who indulged in this aren't valid, but I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to see that this was never what people were meant to take away from a show whose top priority is being funny. Full stop. So many people had been wondering what direction the Smiling Friends fandom was heading. Will it be another Rick and Morty? Will it become infamous? And it seems as if the road taken was to nip it in the bud before we find out. I'm sure that had very little, if any, involvement in their decision to stop making it. Honestly, it'd be a foolish reason to let a fandom influence your decision-making in something as massive as this, but it's definitely not an element worth ignoring. The show kept doing stuff that they thought was funny, but the part that made me laugh most was how it started to increasingly get the opposite reaction from the audience. I remember an episode of Season 3 had Mr. Frog reconnect with his father, who's just a guy with his t-shirt off painted green. And despite Mr. Frog being an incredibly stupid one-note character, intentionally so, the moment is played completely straight. His dad telling him about his mother who passed away from cancer, and how he finds his son to be an embarrassment and a disgrace. It's this fucking stupid-looking frog whose face is on his chest, having a depressing, deep conversation where his dad, who's a guy painted green, tells him he has no son. And people were like, fucking analyzing it and discussing how real and relatable it was, while not understanding that, like, yeah, that's the fucking joke. You're meant to find the juxtaposition funny, the dialogue we're hearing versus who's delivering it. Yet people find it more emotional than anything.
You're too young to understand the underlying themes.
There are no underlying themes!
The show towards the end of its run started getting taken way too seriously. There were actual discussions where people ranted about the characters being too mean to Pim, like what? And look, I know I'm one to talk about that considering my channel, but I hope we can all have an understanding that when I'm making a 20-minute character analysis of Cleveland fucking Brown, that I don't actually care that much. It's a discussion for the sake of discussion, not me actually lamenting about the degradation of a cartoon character. People were getting mad at Charlie, not Zach and Michael, Charlie, for saying something rude to his girlfriend like it wasn't just a fucking joke. Everything needed to be analyzed in regards to what these moments meant for these characters and whether or not it fit with their headcanons to them, and fuck. I was just watching from the sidelines, and even that was tiring. I get being attached to these characters, I'm not gonna knock you for what you got out of the show, but I don't think it's a stretch to say that it wasn't the reaction that they were intending to receive. Such a silly show started getting taken so seriously, like you couldn't just enjoy it for the pure comedy that it was. And I imagine that would have only increased tenfold with a 4th season. And all this is to say, when it comes to making something as mentally and physically demanding as a full season of TV, I don't think things can be chalked up to something as simple as, well, why don't they just make more? Why is Smiling Friends ending so soon? I don't know, because they fucking said so. I'm just happy they gotta go out on top. Don't cry because it's over. Smiling Friends because it happened. Yeah, that works.